Michelle.
Good morning. My name is Charlie DeJong, and it's been my pleasure to work with the kids in this church 1 year now on something called the 30-Hour Famine. The background is a couple years ago when I retired from the parish council, I felt called to do something with kids, and specifically the older kids. Unfortunately, I didn't spend that time when my own kids were here, but trying to make up for lost time. And I work at an organization called World Vision, and coincidentally, came across a program called 30-Hour Famine, which was really made to order for someone like me who wanted to get involved with kids, but really didn't have the time to build all the curriculum from scratch, build a program from scratch. They had an off-the-shelf, very unique program with lots of materials that I could use with the kids, and so I made that sort of my target to understand better, and after talking with Effie and Father, we decided to do our first 30-Hour Famine last year, which by all measures was just an amazing success, a blessing, I think, to everyone who got involved. When I sort of think back on the fact that we were probably one of few Orthodox parishes that participated in the 30-Hour Famine. I think we had one participant that actually qualified age-wise. All the others were technically underage, which meant we had one person, this young man here, who qualified for something called the Famine Tour. Despite those odds, we raised several thousands of dollars. I was just completely amazed by both what the kids did and how the parish and the extended family and friend network of the kids responded. So it was really a neat experience for me. I had great help from my wife Karen and Effie and others, and we'll need that help again because we are doing the second annual 30-Hour Famine. So, a little background, some facts. First, a child dies from hunger-related causes every 8 to 12 seconds. 11,000 a day, under the age of 5. Last time I checked, that doesn't happen much in the United States. We're all pretty well fed. Even in our economic downturn, we have a safety net that prevents those kinds of horrors, and that doesn't exist in most places in the world. In fact, the next fact is that globally 925 million people are hungry and will go to bed hungry tonight. 925 million. Next fact. The poor spend most of their money trying not to starve. 2.6 billion people live on less than $2 a day for everything. That's food, shelter, clothing, water if they have to buy it, $2. And the good news is we can do something about it. Right? There are examples, many examples, current and historically, where people who intend to do good can reverse the impact of hunger by giving. Christ gave us a great example with the little boy's lunch of the fishes and loaves and the feeding of 5,000. And we can do the same thing. And what's really cool is we can start with the kids in our parish being an inspiration and a catalyst for us as adults to get on the bandwagon to reverse statistics like 11,000 children under the age of 5 die and 925 million will go hungry tonight. So we're doing the famine. We're going to fast for 30 hours in late April. I'll give you more details on the schedule. But over the course of the next month or so, in our class, we're going to learn more about poverty, more about hunger, more about the Christian calling to address it, and then we're going to do something about it. And we're going to hopefully do something more about it than we did last year, which was already an amazing success from my perspective. World Vision supplies the program structure, curriculum, so this is, in my opinion, pretty first-class material for the kids to learn from. We will be setting up a fundraising site. Some of the kids will have their own individual fundraising websites. You may be approached face-to-face, via email, via a website link, and I encourage you to support these kids and reinforce the fact that they are doing this because they care from a Christian perspective about poverty and hunger and reversing both. Next weekend is our kickoff class, so I'll see the kids in the teen room, right? On time, ready to go. April 1st, we're going to have our second class. Then we're going to take a couple days off. Palm Sunday, there will not be famine activity, and obviously on Pascha. Then on April 22, we're back. The kids will be doing a presentation, and if you recall the hunger bake sale, if you missed out on the weeds and insects and other forage that many people in the world eat as their daily diet, you'll get to see that again. And then finally, on April 27 and 8, we're going to do the famine weekend. It's 30 hours of fasting. It's closely supervised. It's augmented by juice. And if anyone is concerned about their child actually fasting that long, talk to me and we can work through it. It's an amazing experience. I undoubtedly will get some more of you involved because it's also a big chunk of work, spending 30 hours in activity with starving kids. Which really gets me to the main topic of the day. One of the benefits of participating in the 30-hour famine and qualifying is that you have the opportunity to apply for and participate in something called the Famine Tour, which George is going to tell us about because George qualified and went. Yeah. Not quite yet. You're almost there. This is really an incredible opportunity to go into the field with experienced World Vision people, see the work that World Vision does in the selected country, in this case Burundi, to see how 30-hour famine funds are actually put to work, to hang out for a few days with people that are like-minded Christian activists who want to reverse the impacts of poverty and hunger. So we go to different countries each year, and this year we're going to Zambia. So, for those of you who are now thinking about international travel as opposed to raising money for hunger. Let me give you a couple of factoids. The trip costs $1,500 plus vaccinations. To be eligible, you have to actually participate in the 30-hour famine. You have to raise at least $360. You have to be the ages of between 14 and 20 by May 11th, and you have to be able to travel this August. So I have access to applications for those kids who get to the point where they're qualified and interested. We should be talking. Last year, our own George Chrisafis qualified for and attended, and today he's going to share a bit about his overall famine experience. He's got some good background on World Vision, actually. He's become kind of a World Vision celebrity. Has spoken at our Wednesday chapel several weeks ago in front of several hundreds of people about his experience. Personally, I'm very proud of him and can't wait to hear what he has to say this morning. George is in the 11th grade. He goes to Ballard High School, and please welcome him to the stage.
Trip to Burundi this summer. And first I'd just like to start it off by thanking Charlie as well as my sister for giving me this opportunity, because without both of them I wouldn't have been able to go on the trip. And so let's begin. Alright, so this is a map of Africa, and Burundi is, you can see there's a blue arrow pointing to a very small highlighted green country. It's probably pretty tough to see because it's extremely small. But it's bordered by Tanzania, Democratic Republic of Congo, a very large freshwater lake, and Rwanda. And so here's a map of the actual country of Burundi. A few facts. In this small country, there's over 10.5 million people. And as for the population, there's two main tribes that live in Burundi, and they are the Hutus and the Tutsis. And the population is 85% Hutu. And beginning in the early 1990s, these tribes had a very large conflict that resulted in a mass number of deaths. And that started as a result of the assassination of their first democratically elected president in 1993. And over the next 12 years, over 200,000 people were killed in this conflict. And hundreds of thousands of others were either internally displaced or forced to become refugees in neighboring countries. And there is definitely still evidence of that conflict today, and there's disagreement between the tribes. As for the languages spoken, in the major cities, the official language is French, but as you get into the provinces and the smaller villages, they have a local dialect called Kirundi, and it was very complicated, and I don't think I remember any words in it. As for the gross domestic product per capita in Burundi is $400, which is one of the lowest in the world. And the literacy rate is 60% of all people. And the literacy rate is defined as people aged 15 or over who can read and write. Alright, just a little background about World Vision. It's a Christian humanitarian organization founded in 1950, and it's dedicated to tackling the problems of poverty and injustice in different communities and countries worldwide. And currently, World Vision serves close to 100 million people in 100 different countries. So the 30-hour famine is World Vision's largest fundraiser of the year. Last year, 200,000 teenagers around the country participated in the 30-hour famine, and a total of $9 million was raised. Wow. And so that's a large part of World Vision's funding comes from the 30-hour famine. And as Charlie explained, it's where you fast for 30 hours and learn about hunger in the world, which we started for the first time last year and will continue this year. And then the study tour is a a trip they take every year, and the point of the trip is to see exactly where the funds raised by the 30-hour famine are going. It's not a mission trip at all, but it's just like an educational trip. And the point is to interact with the community members who the funding is affecting, and to come away with a greater understanding of the problems of hunger and poverty. And last year there were 120 kids who applied for the study tour, and there were 9 kids who got to go on the tour. So I was very fortunate.
Good job, George!
There was a lengthy series of interviews and different questions I had to answer and recommendations. So that was a very long process. Alright, so then there's a question of where is the money actually going? And so last year the money from raised from the 30-hour famine went to providing kids in schools in Burundi a meal. And a lot of these kids will walk miles from their homes to come to school every day. And most of them will not even get a full meal in the day without there being a meal at school. So the meal at school is really, it's providing food for kids who would most likely not even have food at all. And the picture in the bottom right is inside a classroom, and that is everyone who went on the study tour. And we are sitting like in the desks, I guess you could call them desks, like wooden planks that the kids would be studying at if they were at school. And so this is the team of kids that went on the study tour. And the picture on the right is everyone meeting at the airport. So that was a day where people were flying in and we were all meeting each other for the first time. We had been connected over Facebook for a while, but we never actually met each other. And then the picture on the left is in front of the World Vision headquarters, which is where we did formal introductions and learned a lot before we went on the trip. So we spent a day at the World Vision headquarters before we actually left on the trip. And the picture on the right, we're in a very large conference room, and we had a bunch of different speakers from the organization sort of prepare us on a little of what to expect on the trip, because going into it, I really had no idea what to expect. And we had presenters from actually people who have lived in Burundi and people who have been to Africa before, and so that was really helpful in sort of mentally preparing myself for what I was going to see. And on the left is we had to go through media training, because during the trip we were being interviewed about what we were seeing. There was a videographer and a photographer on the trip, and so we had to prepare ourselves to be interviewed on camera, which many people had not done before the trip. So it was nerve-wracking at first because you were talking in front of your peers who you had just met, but it was good training for the trip. So that was very helpful. And so this is actually on the trip to Burundi. On the left is a picture of everyone in Amsterdam. We flew from Seattle to Amsterdam, and Amsterdam to Kenya, which is the picture you see on the right. We're boarding the plane in Kenya to go to Burundi. And it was a very small plane with not very many people going to Burundi. So there's not very many people that can afford to travel in and out of Burundi. So this was actually the first day in Burundi, was in the capital city, and so it was definitely not what I expected. We come to this beautiful resort on the beach, and just incredibly beautiful. We spent the first afternoon just sitting on the beach, and so I was like, okay, no, I can do this if this is I wasn't complaining at that point, but little did I know, the next few days would be totally different. Alright, so here, we'll go back to our map of Burundi. And so the capital city is Bujumbura, which you can see is on Lake Tanganyika, which is the body of water. And so the next day we traveled up into northeastern Burundi to the province of Nyuinga, which you can see up there in the top right-hand corner of the map. And the picture on the bottom right is the vans that we rode in to get there. They were extremely small, and we were very cramped on the 4-hour ride from Bujumbura to Nyuinga. And we did not stop, and the roads were very bumpy, and many kids were feeling sick, and we all had to go to the bathroom. It was bad. By the time we got out of the car, I wasn't walking very well. It was tough.
How hot was it?
The weather itself was not very bad. It was in the 80 to 90 degree range, so it wasn't too bad. Burundi's on a very high plateau, which gives it a little cooler temperature than most of its surrounding countries. But the elevation wasn't very high, and you could definitely notice the difference in the air. It was very thin. Alright, so the picture on the left is a picture of us at our hotel in Uinga. And we each had our own small little room that consisted of a bed with a mosquito net and a small bathroom with a shower that you had to fill up buckets from the dripping shower the night before so you could take a shower by pouring the water over yourself. And there was also a small toilet with no toilet seat that was for if you had to go to the bathroom. And so we started out each day in the province in the top right picture in the World Vision office in Uinga. And as you can see in the right hand of that picture, there's all the employees in that office who live in the area and work for World Vision. And we called that devotion, and every day we would sort of go over the plan for the day, and then there would be a lengthy prayer session before we went out into the field. And then the bottom picture there is inside the World Vision compound. The office was to get into the World Vision office. They had to open a large steel gate for you, and there was armed guards guarding the gate. And so you had to get permission to go in, and then permission to go out as well. So that was sort of eye-opening to see that the armed guards were guarding the compound. Alright, so this is part of our actual work in the field. The top left is the van we took to get in between communities. It was again very small and very cramped, and we used it to go along the very bumpy dirt roads in between the different villages. And once we got to like a smaller village or community, in the top right picture, we'd get out of the van, and immediately there would be people surrounding us. Right away, like they knew we were coming. Some of them would run after the van as we pulled into the village. And so as you can see in the bottom left, we were constantly being swarmed by kids and by people. And then the bottom right is the same thing. Like we were in the middle of nowhere, and there would be people, I swear they just like came out of the bushes and they were just there. Like, it didn't even make sense. And we'd just be surrounded by people, and there'd be more and more coming. I'm not sure how the word spread so fast, but everyone knew we were there, and they would come and see us.
What did they want specifically, George? Did they want
They were just
food,
excited
or
to see us, because many of them had never seen white people in their life before. Because Burundi is not well traveled at all. We were actually the first people from World Vision to actually go to Burundi. Unlike Zambia this year, where there have been very many groups, and that was part of the beauty of going to Burundi, was being the first people to actually go there. Alright, and so one of the days we were there, we went to this water project where an organization had drilled into a spring to get clean water for the people living in the surrounding areas. And so we actually got to fill up these jerry cans, which they used to carry their water, and carry them up the hills into their houses for them. And I wasn't as skilled as them because they were carrying them on their heads like it was nothing. And actually one of the kids who I went on the trip with tried to do it, and he lost control of the jerry can and it broke. So that was kind of an awkward moment. But in the end, we ended up getting the family whose can it was 2 brand new cans. So they were very appreciative of that. But the walk they go on to get the clean water is extremely long. For many of them, it's anywhere between 2 and 5 miles. We went up the hill once, a short distance, and then we went back down and filled up our cans again. And the second time I was carrying a 20-liter jerry can, which is very big and heavy. And we had to carry them about 2.5 to 3 miles uphill to their houses. So by the end of that, I couldn't even like move my arms or my leg. Like it was so exhausting. That it was incredible. And these people do that multiple times a day. Yeah, multiple times a day. And
But they put it on their head, right?
yeah. But it's still extremely heavy. And there would be young kids, probably 5, 6 years old, that would be carrying these huge cans, and it's just like it's incredible. We can't even like start to comprehend that. So we'll go to our sink and turn it on and have clean water. They have to walk multiple miles just to get clean water and bring it back to their house. So that was pretty incredible. And this was one of the more probably touching experiences of the trip for me. We went to a pygmy village, and the pygmies are during the Hutu and Tutsi conflict, the pygmies were the servants of both sides, and they really do not have anything. The first thing I noticed when we met these people was that they didn't have fingernails or toenails, because there was a type of fleas there that ate their fingernails and toenails. And they're extremely dirty, and in the top picture, you can sort of see there's a grass hut. It's kind of blending in there, but that was what they lived in. It was probably 5 feet by 5 feet, and they had families of 6 to 8 people living in there. So the bottom left is just some of the pygmies interacting with us, and as soon as we got out of the truck, they all came up to us, and they were rubbing their stomachs and begging us for food. So that was pretty moving. And on the right is pretty dark, but that's the inside of one of their huts. And it was pretty much just a mat on the ground for everyone to sleep on. And that was pretty much it, to be honest. One of the funny stories I have was we brought a few gifts to give to these people in different communities. And we brought a few soccer balls with us. And so we decided to leave one of our soccer balls with these people. And as soon as we brought it out, everyone started cheering and laughing and everything, because they knew what it was, but I don't think they had ever seen a soccer ball in their life. And so we played a little bit, we were playing a little bit of soccer, and then we picked it up and we started playing volleyball with it. And we were hitting it back and forth, like diving and jumping and laughing together. And then one of the men hit the ball really high, and it came down and hit a baby on a mother's back in the head. And so everyone was silent for a second, because we didn't really know what to do. But then everyone started laughing, and even the mom was laughing a little bit. So it worked out well. One of the things about walking around between these huts was that you had to be careful not to step in poop, and these people didn't have animals. So that was kind of just a reminder of what these people have to do in their everyday lives. So that was... Alright, and so one of the gifts we brought was this parachute. And I don't know if you remember from elementary school gym class, but you have the parachute, and then you lift it up high, and everyone would go sit under it. And then you sort of hang out, people would run underneath it when you're flapping it around. And so that was just a really neat interaction with the kids especially. At first they were afraid and didn't really know what to expect, but we would grab their hands and drag them in and kind of force them to interact. And so during this time, I took the hand of a little kid whose mom was next to him, and I started playing with him. And then everywhere I went after that, the mom was following me, and she was holding another, like a baby in her arms. And so I couldn't really communicate with her because she didn't speak any English, and the words I knew in their dialect was, "Hi, what is your name?" That was probably about it. So that was the end of the conversation for the most part. But tried to call a translator over, but that didn't last for very long, and I really don't remember what was said between us. But in the end, she handed her baby to me, and I held her baby for a while. And there was just like a little relationship that developed there, which was really neat. Without even being able to communicate with each other, we were still able to like get along very well and sort of have this bond between us. All right, so these are just a few different random pictures. On the left is a picture. We went into the marketplace one day, and that was very scary, would be a word to describe it. You were constantly looking around you for people. They warned us because there would be people trying to steal things from us because we were white. And everywhere we went, the word for white person in their dialect is Muzungu. And so everywhere we went, there would be people yelling that at us. And it was kind of unnerving because we were so out of place. and like very few white people had been here before, so they weren't saying it to be like degrading or like hateful. They were saying it because they were surprised. Like, what are these people doing here? We've never seen them before. But that was still very nerve-wracking at times because you were constantly being stared at and called out, and it just felt like you were really out of place. And the top right-hand picture is we were interacting with people in this field, and these two kids came up to us, and the younger kid must have been 2 or 3 years old, and he was carrying a very large machete. And so we tried to figure out where their parents were, and we couldn't. So there was oftentimes there would be kids running around without their parents with dangerous things like these big machetes, and it just shows you the reality of what their life is like. And that was evident in the bottom picture as well, where this young child was just walking around by his or herself, and we were me and this other kid on the trip, that's Robert, were interacting with the kid, and we could not figure out where the parents were. So the average family in Burundi is between 6 and 8 people, so that makes a lot of sense that parents can't watch over everyone. Alright, so this is, we went to this lady's house, and the lady we're talking about is the one in the middle, between the gentleman and the other woman who was a translator. And her son actually moved from Burundi to Seattle, and he works for World Vision. And he was one of the ones who talked to us before we went on the trip. And so we told him where we were going, and he realized that his mother lived right near the place where we were going. So we told him, oh well, we'll go see your mom for you, and we can deliver anything you want to her. And so he wrote a letter addressed to his mom, and one of the days we went to her house, and she welcomed us in with great happiness. And we sat in her house, and she read the letter, and was very happy. And then she started talking about her life and the life of her family. And she talked about it very openly. Her husband was killed in the conflict, and she one of her sons, I believe, was too. And her other son, Francois, who lives in Seattle, was the one who escaped and moved to Seattle. And so just she welcomed us with open arms into her house, which was probably one of the nicer houses in the area. And she was very welcoming. And it was just very interesting to see how she openly talked about people in her family who she lost that were very close to her. So that was very a moving experience as well. Alright, so this, every morning our videographer and our photographer would go out and do a story by themselves, which when we were still sleeping and it was very early, and one of the stories they came and reported back to us was the story of a father in his mid-20s and his young son, who is in the top left picture, but the man with him is not his father. He's a guy who works for World Vision in New England, but the son is on the left there. And his mother left him when he was 3 months old, and because he wasn't breastfed, he became very mentally delayed and slow. And his father has been doing his best to take care of him. They had a very small piece of land and pretty much no money. I think they had 3 or 4 banana trees on their piece of land, but that was about it. And the father had sketched out a plot of land where he hoped to one day build a house, but he didn't know if he'd ever have the money to. And he had to carry his child with him whenever he went to find work, because one day he left his child at home and he was stolen by one of his neighbors. And that same neighbor also stole much of his land, the small land that he owned as well. So whenever he goes to find work, he carries his child with him, and that slows him down a lot, but he does it out of love. And so that story really hit us hard, being the students on the trip, and we wanted to make a difference in their lives. So we calculated how much money it would take to build him a house, and that came out to $200. So being 9 kids on the trip, we paid about $20 each, and we left the money with the World Vision staff there, and they said they would see to it that he got a house built. And so this was a report we got. And so these pictures are a report we got, I'd say about a month ago. And there are pictures of people building this house. And so you can see there are very many people who got work as a result of our money. And this man was also going to have a house for him and his child. And so this is their finished house with the child standing outside. So it really made us feel good that we left our mark on someone's life in Burundi. Then coming home was very rough. The first, I'd say, month or so was just still shell shock from the trip. On the trip, there was a night where I felt extremely guilty for having a full plate of food in front of me. That was after we'd seen the pygmies and they were begging us for food. And I really could not eat the food because of how guilty I felt. And I definitely felt the same way like that for, I'd say, a good month after the trip. And just realizing that here I am probably going to waste food, and there are people who give anything to have that wasted food. It just did not feel right at all. And just more like the awareness of things going on in the world was just incredible after the trip. Yeah, going back to school was tough because I knew that there were kids my age living in Burundi who had stopped going to school years before, and I just couldn't imagine what that would be like. So pretty much that was the biggest thing, is just realizing that there are people in the world like me who didn't have anything like me. So how has this trip changed me is a pretty big question. So like I said, it's definitely increased my awareness of poverty and hunger in the world, but especially where we live. It's been incredible. My high school baseball team, we played Renton High School earlier this week, and I would call the Renton High School baseball team a sad excuse for a varsity baseball team. We beat them 20-0, and during the game I was extremely sad because these were poor kids, mostly minorities, that were playing baseball because they love to play baseball, not because they have the money to afford baseball things. And so I was curious, because I was curious, I went and checked their records from the last 2 years. And last year they won 2 games and lost 18 games, and their worst loss was 29-0. So just realizing that these kids were playing baseball just for the love of baseball, and they were getting smashed every game, and they kept playing, and it really wasn't their fault, because if you don't have money in baseball, honestly, money's a very big part of baseball. And I was thinking, if these kids were able to afford half the coaching that I've had, they would be incredible. But just because they're less fortunate than I am, it didn't sit right with me, and it still doesn't sit right with me. So, yeah, just continuing to find ways to support those who are not as lucky as me is one of my goals. And hopefully raise money for people in Africa as well as people in the United States, because the same problems are going on here, just not on nearly as large of a scale. But I think it's just really important to realize that we should still be helping people in our country as well as people around the world. So that was my trip to Burundi.
Questions?
George, can you just tell the story that you told us? It's nice to hear this because I haven't really heard this whole thing either, about the kids when you were going up to the village, about how people were getting up the 4 hours from the capital to the village, the bicyclists, that looked like. I remember that.
Yeah, the main economical strategy, I guess, in Burundi is agriculture. And so these people would load on their bikes, I don't even know how many pounds of crops, and they'd ride through the mountains to sell it in markets. And so we'd be driving behind a truck, like a small semi-truck, and there would be at least 10 plus people holding onto the back of the truck with their hands while riding on a bicycle loaded with crops, because they couldn't make it up the mountain. And there would be other times where we'd see 2 or 3 people pushing the same bike, trying to get it up the mountain. So it was just extremely dangerous, but these people were doing it because they had to do it. And I'm sure their fatalities are very common among people like that. So.
Tell us about the relationships between the kids that came from the U.S. and participated on the tour. What was that like? Kids from all over the country.
Everyone got along. Yeah, they were kids from many different states. I see Texas, Pennsylvania, just all over. And we had talked to each other a little bit on Facebook, but then once we met each other, it was just like automatic, great relationships. And everyone got along because everyone had similar ideals and beliefs, so that was very helpful. Especially the religious tie. Everyone was Christian, and that was really a bonding thing too. We actually, this past winter, we got together again, many of the kids from the trip, in one of the girls' houses in Minnesota, because we were just developed that kind of relationship because we experienced these things together.
George, if you had to think of 2 or 3 adjectives to describe these Burundi people, what adjectives would you apply to them?
Happy is
They're
one.
happy.
Happy. Optimistic. Definitely optimistic. They were always looking, trying to find the bright side of things, even though they were in their situation. Many of these people were happier than I've ever been. Like, it was just incredible to see. They have nothing, but they're so happy, and they were welcoming. Was another one too, because whenever they were just extremely welcoming to us. In fact, in the pygmy village, one of the fathers who owned one of the little grass huts offered us to stay in his hut with him. So it was just like that kind of thing that was just extremely welcoming and happy was what I took out of it.
And you didn't find them sort of downtrodden at all, feeling they don't feel downtrodden.
No,
Maybe
I
they
didn't
don't
see
know.
anyone that
Maybe they
appeared
don't
that
know
way.
the difference, so they don't.
Right, they don't. Yeah. I wonder what it'd be like for them to come here and just see it. I don't
And
know.
then go back, maybe then they would feel downtrodden.
I think so, but they haven't seen anything else. So.
Are they a religious people?
Most of them are, yeah. Most of them are Christian, actually. So during our devotions with the people who work for World Vision, we always say a long prayer and that sort of thing.
George? Thanks, right. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I thought that the Pygmies were forest people.
They
Traditional.
live. Some live in the forest, but the village we went to lived on a large plain. So that was just the one we went to. I'm not sure if there's other ones, but that was the one we visited.
Are they smaller?
I feel like that's a common myth about them, but they were not any smaller than we were, or the people that we were interacting with. So
Maybe the forest pygmies are.
Father Tom?
It's kind of a hard question, but you said they're really happy and extending themselves to you. Can you talk 1 minute your idea of how we as a country who have everything are really influenced by a lot of depression? And I'm sure they struggle there too, but what's your idea of, I'm not sure how much Prozac they take over there or stuff like that, but what's your idea of the challenges we have here as your age group suffering with depression and suicide?
I think that just comes from wanting things that we can't or don't have. And these people, they didn't want anything. They were just wanting to survive. Like they didn't really want anything material. I think that's a big cause of this sort of thing, is not being able to have things that we want. And so with these people, that was all they knew, and they didn't have anything else to think about.
Just survive.
Yeah, exactly. That was one of the questions about the little kid and his father whose house we built. They asked him, what do you, like, from one day to the next, what do you want? And he said, I want to survive.
So they don't have time to be depressed.
Exactly.
Because
They're-
they've got to survive.
yeah, and they're always,
They've
I
got to
think
get the water.
looking forward to the future helps them to
They've got
not be
fetch
in
the
that
water,
place, because they,
push the
exactly,
water,
yeah,
you know.
they're,
You don't have time to be depressed.
exactly, like
And
they're always
there's no Prozac if
optimistic.
you are, so forget it.
Exactly. I'm sure there are people who are. They, Cleo?
How does their culture affect how they live?
What do you mean?
Like, how does their culture affect things they do? Or like, how is the culture very different from?
Well, people are just happier than they are here. That's a major difference in the culture. And for the most part, everyone is very friendly with each other, minus a few different minus the stealing and stuff like that. But everyone seems like they are family, and it's not like that at all here. We're always competing with one another. These people are helping one another.
Do they pray?
Yes, they do.
I'm sure
Yeah,
they
they're
do. I'm sure they do.
yeah.
Do they,
Many of them are religious.
do they have any devotion where they get together and they sing hymns or anything?
They have traditional dances and stuff where that prayer is part of that. Yes, we actually got to see that too. So that was pretty cool. John?
Do they have communication with outside of that local area? Via cell or radio or?
No, they don't have any of that stuff. The only communication is by foot or by bike. So that was really nobody had cars besides the few people in the major cities. So
The change has come very slow.
very slow, very slow.
There's 2 more questions.
Standard lifespan of people over there.
60 years. 60 years, yeah. But the median age there is 17. So they have a very, very young population. I'll take Dean and Marty both.
Are the people from the people that you meet in the city, were they different than the people that you met in the rural areas?
They were definitely different because they had a lot more.
Were they like, did you see like, was there a difference in how they welcomed you? Were people in the city less welcoming than people in the
Definitely, definitely.
Just it sounds like there's no waste there. What did you see in the market? Were they pretty much selling everything?
Selling everything. They would
Every
have
part
pieces-
of the animal?
They would have a skinned animal hanging up, and they would be chopping parts off of it and selling them. It's just stuff like that. Yeah.
There's no waste, huh?
No waste. Everything gets eaten there. Nothing gets wasted.
Thanks.
Before we say thanks, I want to ask how you were impacted by this phenomenal, incredible human being. I want 3 minutes. How you were touched by George. What touched you? What touched you about
Really touched, and I didn't get to see his whole presentation, but I see the change. I see the impact this has had on your life, and I expect great things of you.
more what touched you inside as he was speaking? I can tell you in like 5 hours of how it touched me.
I was going to say the same thing as Janelle. It touched me that he realized how fortunate he was, how much he had, how little other people have. I think it gives travel gives one a broad vision, and it's so important to have a global perspective. Teenagers especially can be pretty inwardly focused, so that touched me.
Anyone else?
I think, George, as I listen to you talk, I think you're a person with great perspective anyway. But what I heard you describe and the adjectives that you chose, the lessons that you learned, you really went over there and came back with probably the greatest lesson, and that is that they're very thankful, they're very family-oriented, love above all, and the fact that you saw that and were able to summarize that is probably a lesson many of us, wouldn't experience other than through you. So thank you very much.
Please, Bill, how were you touched by Mr. George? Let me ask the 2 young girls. Were you here at the family last? Yeah. Well, what touched you? Because he's like pretty much your age.
Okay, what touched me was that I kind of agree with Karen that you're able to realize such a great lesson that like some people wouldn't have the privilege to learn.
How about you?
I guess it made me think about like what I had and what I really needed.
We had and we needed, yeah.
On a funny note, how was it showering with the little water? I had that experience.
We wanted to see a picture of you taking a shower. you would be inventive, right? We had to do that. Everybody had a creative engineer aspect. We'll get to that in the private story later. 2 more people. What touched you about this man, young man? What's that?
Like the problems that we think are big in our daily lives, like
big, like we think, like, you know how we say, oh, this is so bad, my life is over, but it really isn't compared to what these people go through every day.
What touched you about George speaking? One more. All right.
I guess just his openness to the culture and to the realities of the life there, and how it he really did apply it. You know, your thoughts and your words, you applied it to your own situation. You found that you were very you saw the contrast and your compassion drove you to the feeling of I don't know, guilt, you said, and difficulty in trying to reconcile the differences between these two areas.
George, as your priest, I want to tell you what touched me was your incredible poise. A human being that has poise will go far in life. How you presented, how you said, you were very articulate, very thorough. You didn't mince your words. You offered just enough for us to taste and see. I want to congratulate you in your abilities. Really extraordinary abilities of speaking. It's not the easiest thing. You young people, I think we're blessed to have great kids here. I want you to continue to help foster and nurture that in this church. You have incredible strength, George, and your heart is huge. I think we had another half hour. I'd love to know what cracked your heart open, because you cannot not go there and not have your heart crack open. And that's where God meets us, in that sacred place. Again, I want to congratulate you. I think what you shared with us is extraordinary. How you presented was extraordinary. You were very graceful, very articulate, don't you think, everyone? Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you so much. And I want to thank Charlie for opening the door to help make this happen, and really, not a lot of people don't know that Cleo, she just jammed on making the sales. The sales, she kind of like offers some of the sales product profits to her. Actually, Cleo told me she's going to try to apply for this next mission. Let's all stand. Don't forget your flowers. Please put them on your prayer corners. Remind yourself about, really, what George is talking to us is about the victory of the cross. How can a people that was the people that have been massacred, how long ago? Check this out. 5-6 years ago, they were massacred. How many people? Tell them again.
200,000.
Not 10 people, 200,000 people. See it in front of your face. These people. Okay? And what George is saying, they're joyous, they're happy. This is the victory of the cross. That nothing, not even a massacre, not even a madman, not even this guy Coney that everyone knows about now, and the atrocities, not even that is going to treat us in the will of God. It's you that become bearers of that cross, bearers of that life, and become vessels of that Holy Spirit, and bring that light into the world. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Lord, we're so grateful for your holy cross, that we may be inspired, that we may hold it with pride on the cross that you trampled death upon death. May you open our hearts to love. May you open our hearts to be full of life and light. May you continue to bless your beloved servant, George, and all good things, and all our kids here, that we may serve you and be focused in your kingdom. Amen. Have a blessed rest of the week. Hopefully we'll see you Wednesday.